I'm urging the federal government to release the tariff revenue that it has collected to support businesses, to support workers that are going to be affected by this. The billions that have been collected in Canadian tariffs need to be released and put back in the economy.
Delusion. That is what liberals are by definition these days. And we're going to be fact checking all of their latest cover-ups for their failures. I'm Jasmine Elaine. Subscribe, follow, like, comment your thoughts down below. And as always, share this video so we can wake up as many people as humanly possible, because our lives actually depend on it at this point in time. Instead of a plan to fix trade, Mark Carney has offered empty slogans like, "We'll be our own best customer." I thought he hated those. And today, of all days, you will not believe what he did to try to distract you away from the reality that is unfolding by his hand. Oh, and fun fact, it's funded by your tax dollars, and it's a federally owned asset that is tied to his minister's husband. But wait, it gets worse. The CRTC has also announced that they're going to be controlling media even more under the guise of protecting journalism. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated.
No, like what our strategy with Trump, and I've dealt with Trump in the past, he respects strength. He respects strength. Like a lot of bullies, he respects strength. And that's part of the reason, look, we got to build here for ourselves, but it's also to show him that we are masters in our own home. Right? We're in charge.
And as the government is corrupt, writes on X, if Mark Carney secures a trade deal with the U.S., his supporters would praise him for negotiating with Trump to get the best deal for Canada. If he doesn't, his supporters will praise him for refusing to negotiate with Trump. These people are insane and cannot be reasoned with. What was that? I was saying delusional. Yeah, that sounds about right, especially now that Canada actually has the 5th highest tariffs in the entire world.
2 countries on the whole world retaliated against the United States of America tariffs. China, which we all know, and Canada. So you know what? I just don't see the president stepping off the gas. Now, Mark Carney came down, had a really nice lunch with the president when he first got elected. You know, if he makes that call and if he starts turning on the charm and if he takes off his retaliation, and stops the silliness, maybe the president will let it down a bit. But right now, 35%, that letter he sent, is surely in the cards.
Mark Carney posted a statement very late last night. Apparently, it was a super late night for him and all of those talks that they're having that seem to just always lead to nowhere. If there's anything I can be certain of amidst all of this, it's that a lot of Canadians really hated Justin Trudeau. And I have a really big feeling they're about to hate Mark Carney so much more than they ever did Justin Trudeau because, well, everything he's promised has been a complete lie. And while I'm not going to read verbatim the statement he had, it's on the screen if you want to read it yourself. I'm just going to summarize it for you as well as give some hypothesis on the very important language to pay attention to here because Mark Carney is very smart. He's very smart and calculating, and those are the scariest people in most societies. So he goes and says, yep, Donald Trump raised the tariff 35% on Canadian exports not covered by CUSMA. Says he's disappointed by this, that, the tariffs hit key sectors, including lumber, steel, aluminum, autos, hit them very hard, and that Canada plans to protect jobs, diversify exports, and encourage Buy Canadian. Wow, we're going to rip that apart very soon. You definitely want to listen to it because it's going to be eye-opening. He also tries to justify the whole fentanyl situation because Donald Trump has again cited the cross-border trafficking, even though Canada only accounts for 1% of what's caught because we only check 1% of it. So obviously, you're not going to find more than that. Alrighty. And he says that, Canadian border security investments are good. Yeah. And that the U.S. overreacted and Canada is investing in enforcement. Whatever happened to our border czar? Haven't heard from that guy ever, actually, now that I think about it. He also kind of shifted to a new domestic focus while negotiations continue. He's pivoting to nation building rhetoric, claiming, $500 billion in potential investments. Interesting. He also goes on to say that Canada will be its own best customer instead of prioritizing trade repairs. So here's a little bit of my hypothesis on this statement and how it's written, what it means. Number one, damage control. Mark Carney is absolutely trying to contain political fallout after failing to prevent Trump's tariffs, especially damaging because it shows his government's diplomatic weakness with our top trading partner, our top trading partner. Yeah, they couldn't do that, could they?
Essentially, the headline here is that Canada chose to retaliate, to fight back, and they have been punished for it. Donald Trump warned any country, orally, also in writing in the text of his various orders, that there would be consequences for retaliating against his tariffs. Canada went ahead, retaliated anyway, put in place its own counter tariffs on U.S. goods, also pulled American booze off the shelf and canceled American contracts, and took a number of economic measures designed to get attention, get noticed in Washington, put political pressure on the Trump administration. And notably, other than the ongoing trade war between Washington and Beijing, Canada was the only one that chose to retaliate and fight back in this way.
There's also a huge narrative shift happening in this statement by invoking jobs nationalism as well as the Fentanyl situation, of which he says is not a crisis at all. He's been on record saying that. So the statement is definitely attempting to shift blame and recast the issue that Canada is resilient rather than Canada has failed foreign policy. This is definitely a diversion tactic because it conveniently times the statement to be released right after Canada's unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state, something that likely did strain the U.S. ties days before the trade deadline. Actually, here's what Trump had to say about that in particular.
You know, I didn't like what they said, but, you know, that's their opinion. I didn't like that. Not a deal breaker, but we haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called, and we'll see.
And while this was posted by Donald Trump within the last hour, I do think there's definitely something to take away from it that can apply to everybody, especially Canada right now. He writes, based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances.
The Canadians put out, oh, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. I mean, come on, don't be so tone deaf, right? The president is totally into trying to get peace in Gaza, and you're throwing your hat in the ring from Canada? Come on. You know, they still haven't solved dairy.
Kevin McLeod writes, don't just look at the headlines. You'd think a 35% tariff was going on to everything Canada exports to the USA, but it's only 6% of goods we sell that are not covered under existing USMCA free trade agreements. Canadian politicians lying for personal gain aren't helping Canada. It just creates fear and division. That's not leadership. And in reality, Mark Carney's statement about this is just so pathetic and weak, and it reads more like a press release for a domestic campaign than a real trade strategy of any kind. Like to go in there and write, oh, $500 billion investment. From where? Where are we getting the money from? Canada is losing this war thanks to liberal government and policies, the liberal government and policies. So the optics versus the reality here is insane. And his claims are so unsubstantiated. And then the call to, we just got to buy more Canadian. Bro, like, read the room. Like, it ignores the reality that so many Canadians and industries rely on exports to the USA to survive. How can you be so tone deaf?
Folks, we all know this is a serious time for our province and our country. With President Trump taking direct aim at our economy, his goal is to take every single business out of our country, out of our province, and bring it down to the U.S. But I'll tell you, I will fight like I've never fought before, and we're going to continue fighting against President Trump and his radical views. I better stop there because I'll get on a rant.
His radical views? Like free trade? Yeah, that's real radical, isn't it, Mr. Ford? And honestly, Donald Trump, he actually released a fact sheet. Wow, seriously, the U.S. government, you can hate Donald Trump all you want, but at least they are super transparent compared to our government, where even CBC actually admitted this. I'll show you this clip before we jump into the fact sheet that was released from the White House.
It's a bit tricky to know the state of play, Katie, because government officials were pretty quiet yesterday. Dominic LeBlanc, the minister responsible for these trade talks, was in Washington, but we didn't see him on camera at all. He didn't hold a news conference or anything, and we didn't hear from Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday either, as the clock was ticking down and these talks were going on. But we do know it was a late night in the Prime Minister's office, because we did get a statement from Carney posted on social media a little bit after midnight. And he's saying that the government is disappointed by this action. But that's about as much as he said in terms of reaction.
Mark Carney, absolutely nowhere to be found, but he did post on social media today, big news and big savings for Atlantic Canadians. Starting today, Confederation Bridge tolls are cut from over $50 down to $20, and interprovincial ferry fares in Atlantic Canada have been cut by 50%. And if you want to go through and actually read some of the details there, Marty up north nails this one. The Confederation Bridge that links PEI to New Brunswick is a federally owned asset operated by Strait Crossing Bridge Limited, who in turn subcontracts many other private businesses for maintenance, operating, and toll booths. Just a heads up, the SCBL doesn't make any profit, so Ottawa makes an annual subsidy payment toward the cost of financing, operating, and maintaining the bridge, adjusted annually for inflation. In 2023, the subsidy payment was $77.2 million. Reducing the toll from 50 to 20 just means that all Canadian taxpayers will have to pay more. Shocker, subsidies, they suck. Anita Anand, the current Minister of Transport and Internal Trade, has a husband, John Knowlton, who is a senior managing director at OMERS Infrastructure, an Ontario pension fund investor. Until May 2022, OMERS Infrastructure held a 65.1% stake in Strait Crossing Development, which is SCBL's parent company, through the BPC Maritime Corporation. Follow the money, folks. That's what Mark Carney wanted to post about today. Hey, Canada, we know that we totally lied and failed and manipulated the shit out of you. But hey, don't worry. If you live near PEI, we're going to reduce some of those costs. That's actually going to end up costing you more realistically in the bigger picture. And it may or may not also go towards funding our own minister's husband, which is a huge conflict of interest. Wowza, I'm just so incredibly surprised. Back to the Trump White House, though. So they're quite transparent about all of this. And yeah, you may have some issues with them, but at the very least, they issued a fact sheet about Canada where they say that they're increasing the tariffs from 25 to 35%. Why? Well, because shortly after returning to office, President Trump declared a national emergency to address, among other things, the public health crisis caused by illicit doctor rugs that are flowing through the northern border into the United States. Something that Mark Carney wants you to say, oh, it's only 1%, 1%. Yeah, well, you know what? Let's say that even you do use that 1% number, which is a lie. That's not an accurate number. Again, it's only what we check. That 1% number, if you actually break it down, is enough to lethally dose over 9 million Americans, by the way, not to mention how many it's lethally dosing in our own country. But sure, 1%, not a big deal. 9 million people. Canada's population is a little over 40 million. That's a good chunk of people that can take out, isn't it? Sounds like it's a big, big problem. Not to mention, it's likely significantly higher than 1%. And then it goes on to say that Canada has failed to cooperate in curbing the ongoing flood of Fentanyl and other illicit doctor rugs. And it has retaliated against the United States for the president's actions to address this unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States. Number one, Canada is currently losing. And I'm not saying that as some right-wing radical. I'm just saying that going by the statistics and the data of which our own government releases and then often cherry picks data points from. You cannot really build one Canadian economy when businesses can't compete to sell their goods, which, actually kind of goes back to losing access in some cases to the American market. They knew this was coming. And they did absolutely nothing. They knew this was coming months ago. And rather than acting, Mark Carney and his cabinet doubled down on ideology and international PR stunts, like recognizing Palestine as an example. And this really is, at the end of the day, the cost of globalist optics over strategy. You don't get to burn bridges with the U.S. and then act surprised, offended when Trump hits back, because every single one of these things was entirely preventable. And, really to summarize this, when it comes to Mark Carney and his inaction on absolutely everything, Canadians didn't vote for sovereignty like he promised. What they voted for was an illusion of stability, which the Liberal government has been trying to pretend exists for many, many years. What we got was a very woke marketing campaign, ballooning deficits like we've never seen before, and a government much more concerned with media headlines than manufacturing jobs. Actually, on that note, I thought this was quite fascinating. This is from Blacklock's reporter that there is a petition to criminalize lying. A Liberal-sponsored petition is asking the Commons to criminalize political lies. And the petition was sponsored by the Parliamentary Secretary for Industry, saying, and I quote, "MPs have been accused of making important public statements that are false and without evidence."
I'll just tell you, our government is doing everything in its power to cut red tape and make Ontario and Canada the strongest economy in the G7. Our government has a plan to protect Ontario. And I always say our job is not only protect Ontario, but protect communities, protect families, protect jobs and businesses. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I will not spare a penny to make sure we do it.
Really, the government is doing everything in its power, such as repealing certain legislation that makes it impossible to do anything in this country. Yeah, no, they're not doing that, actually. Well, what about, using the money collected through tariffs, like you said you were going to help Canadian businesses?
I'm not sure that the Pope himself could negotiate a trade deal with Donald Trump that would be suitable. But my advice to the federal government, in fact, I'm urging the federal government to release the tariff revenue that it has collected to support businesses, to support workers that are going to be affected by this. The uncertainty alone is deeply affecting them. They can't go any longer. The billions that have been collected in Canadian tariffs need to be released and put back in the economy if we want to keep some of these businesses going until such time as a deal can be made.
Yeah, doesn't sound like they're doing that either. But don't worry, guys, because the liberal machine propaganda is on full tilt today with François-Philippe Champagne again reiterating that Canada, we have the resources and the talent to just build Canada strong like we've never seen it before.
We're going to be at the table to negotiate. We're going to protect our industry and our workers. But the most important thing, we're going to build this country like never before. For me, this is about building this new Canada. This is our moment. And I think we have everything in this country with the talent, the resources, the critical minerals. I'm here in Toronto. This is a hub of innovation, a hub of services in our country. Listen, there's so much we can do. Canada has a great position to build this country like never before.
Canada's in a great position to build this country like never before. Well, let's fact check that, shall we? I mean, first and foremost, Carney and the Liberals keep saying, we're going to be our own best customer. That's actually the problem, though. We already are. Canadians are taxed to death and priced out of basics and are now getting crushed by tariffs because this government can't manage a very basic trade relationship with our closest ally who has made what he wants incredibly clear. But then instead of fixing it, we get a speech about we just really need to be our own best customer. Carney played the optics game and lost. So now what? Because retaliatory tariffs don't work when you have no leverage. They don't work when they hurt your own economy more than the US tariffs, by the way. And there's just this huge myth. And I hear this all the time. I've been seeing this like crazy online today. We're just going to diversify away from the US and trade with Europe. Really, how exactly do you want to do that? Because as it stands right now, we don't have the infrastructure to support that. We don't have port capacities, pipelines. We also don't have shipping infrastructure to ramp up exports to Europe at scale, especially for oil and gas and agriculture. Absolutely every single thing is bottlenecked by overreaching regulatory actions from the Liberal government. Because remember, about a decade ago, Canada was not like this. We were not in this situation, and we had a government that was actively trying to expand our reach. And then those projects got shut down. More regulations got put in place, so we actually couldn't do that. Also, we've had endless meetings with Europe with zero results. We have been talking to Europe and Asia about trade diversification for years with nothing to show for it. Rather, Europe has gone deeper into aligning with the United States. So Europe is not waiting for Canada to get its act together. They're just doubling down on what works, as anybody with a brain cell would probably do. We already have, this is probably the most important one too, when you want to talk about diversifying our trade. There are already long-term deals locked in. Most countries have long-term contracts with other suppliers, such as Qatar or Brazil or Australia. When it comes to their using Indonesia for minerals, using LNG for Europe, or Argentina for agricultural goods. So Canada can't just slide in. Oh, it's just going to be so easy to go and diversify all of that stuff, if we even had the infrastructure to do it in the first place, without violating somebody else's trade deal that's signed and waiting for renewals. So you mean to tell me that we're going to diversify our trade overnight? No, that's probably going to take years, many, many years, if they even want our product to begin with. And with the extra taxes we have from the Liberal government, such as the industrial carbon tax, as an example, that's not very competitive. And that's probably the biggest problem Canada faces, is that we are our number one customer because we are taxed to death for all of these things that don't matter, that mean nothing, because the Liberals chose to seal off all of that other opportunity from the rest of the world. And as a result, Canada's energy and mining sectors are crippled by red tape, by anti-development policies, and by taxes. Other countries are faster to approve, they're cheaper to operate in by a long shot, and they're also far more politically stable for business. So we're not an attractive supplier at all. We are expensive, unreliable, and a bureaucratic mess. And Europe is not a supply chain replacement for the U.S. market, no matter how much they want to tell you that it is. Here's the facts. The U.S. is Canada's number one customer by a massive margin, and you really can't replace a shared language, common standards, an integrated supply chain, road access, population density. Europe can't even absorb a fraction of what we export to the U.S., even if they didn't have other obligations to other countries. So everything about this is just complete incompetence. It is just a lie. It is such a lie. And what is one of the number one ways that the far left media machine ensures control over the narrative? Well, they just create new government-backed funds for the media, obviously, and then also hand select who qualifies as per usual. So this week, the CRTC quietly approved a commercial radio news fund, which sounds kind of harmless at first. However, it means that radio stations in small towns of Canada will now rely on federal subsidies in order to survive. Subsidies that are controlled by the same government that is being criticized, of course. So, we can break that down a little bit. The same people that are absolutely failing us now get to directly fund what your local, perhaps small town radio stations cover. And it is a fact, I know this from working in the industry for 11 years, that a lot of radio stations are hurting, especially the smaller ones. And so this could be super harmless at first. We've seen what this turns into. CBC, case in point. So this isn't journalism at all. This would be state-backed message laundering, I could put it that way, which of course is pushed under the guise of supporting local news, who does actually need the support. The thing about this that really sucks, though, is that the CRTC decides what counts as real Canadian content. And so if your views don't align with their definitions, good luck. And do you really think that a smaller town local radio station, who maybe was actually a key point for truth, is going to suddenly start criticizing the very government that is allocating this funding? I think not. Again, CBC, as an example. You control the funding, you control the framing, and guess what? You control the country. And that's what we have been seeing for many years here in Canada. I'm Jasmine Lane. Hope you have a beautiful long weekend. I will be back with you tomorrow. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, follow, comment your thoughts down below, and I will see you very soon.